All right, today we have John Crossman with us. John, thank you for joining us. I have a little context, but please tell me about your upbringing. Maybe a quick 2-minute synopsis of who you were growing up. Did you play sports? Were you a good student? Who your parents were? Give me a little context.
Sure. Well, first off, it's so nice to be with you, and thanks for all you do. You're doing a great job promoting important topics, so thank you. My dad was a pastor and civil rights leader, so I grew up in a pretty unique environment for that. And being a preacher's kid, they've done studies that preacher kids tend to outperform both doctors' kids and lawyers' kids. And I think the reason why that is that growing up in a preacher's kid's house, particularly being civil rights leader's house, you grew up in an educated home, you grow up in a very community-minded home, and you grow up in a limited funds home, And so I always tell people I became a devout capitalist at a young age because I saw what my dad had influence without affluence. And I thought, man, if you can have influence and affluence, there's big things that can happen. So the quick thing is I had that exposure. The second thing is that when my dad was a pastor, old school Protestant churches, you have big pulpit, little pulpit. Big pulpit's the word of God, little pulpits where they announce bake sales. And pastors don't give up big pulpit easily. And my dad, from my earliest memories on, would give up his pulpit to Dr. Oswald Bronson, the president of Bethune-Cookman, that time college. And Dr. Bronson would come in and guest preach, and he would bring in his concert chorale. And being a Methodist minister, we moved 9 times growing up. And wherever we moved, Bethune-Cookman came to us. So before I knew about Florida State, or any other major college, the Ohio State University, wherever you're from, I didn't know about those schools. I knew about Bethune-Cookman. The first college I ever went to was an HBCU. And then I ran track my whole life. I was a sprinter, and I went to FSU and ran track there. And being a sprinter at FSU, I went to the FAMU relays. All 4 years ran the FAMU relays. And so I ran against every HBCU you can think of. So I had just a very HBCU specific kind of childhood.
Makes sense. So you went to Florida State. Why did you choose Florida State?
I didn't have any kind of big influence from my parents as far as where to go to school. A lot of it was just research I did on my own. And Florida State just really connected well to me. When I was talking to people from Florida and they'd say, "Where are you looking?" I'd say, "Florida and Florida State." The Florida people would always go, "Oh, how could you possibly look at Florida State?" They were very arrogant. And then when I talk to Florida State people and I'd say, where are they looking? I'd say, "I'm looking at Florida State in Florida." And they go, "Oh, Florida's a really good school." And I just love they just seemed like more humble. I think because Florida State's background was a college for women, and it just has a more of a humble spirit to it. And it just connected to me because again, I didn't come from this big wealthy family. I came from a regular family. So it just connected to me better.
Makes sense. Now, what did you study in college?
So I was a real estate major. I went to college to do finance. And again, I kind of wanted to major in money. I wanted to be finance or economics. And I was taking my first real estate class. And the professor said, for all you finance majors, if you major in real estate over finance, you'll make more money and have more fun doing it. And at 19 years old, that was very appealing. And so I switched to real estate, and I've worked in real estate for 30 years, and I have a bachelor's degree in real estate.
Nice. So let's get into the nitty gritty here. I became aware of you from a tweet.
Mm-hmm.
And in the tweet, you said you're a Christian conservative Republican and you support HBCUs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you gave a little context of BCU pretty much following you everywhere you went, but why is it that you're a Christian conservative Republican that supports HBCUs?
Sure. Well, let's break those words down first. Okay. So I put them in that context because I put them in that order. And I actually got that from former Vice President Mike Pence. He said, "I'm a Christian conservative Republican," in that order. And so I like that because when I start with Christian beats the other two, right? So if you came to me and said, "John, I don't know that you're a person of faith. I don't mean to put that on you, but if you were to say, 'Hey, John, as a person of faith, I believe this is important. We need to work on this." Well, it doesn't matter what someone's political party is, or if they're a liberal or they're Democrat or whatever. If they're Christian, that's the first alignment. That alignment beats the other alignment. So what starts me out as far as what I'm trying to do with my life is my Christian faith. So then you move on to conservative. And so to me, conservatism has to deal with like ideological kind of views. And so like if you came to me and said, "Hey John, I've got a young family member and they just want some advice on how to have a life and have a successful life, what advice do you have for them?" Well, I'm going to give them advice just like I would give to my daughters, and they're going to be conservative, right? I'm going to say things like, well, get as much education as you can, have as little debt as possible, get married and then have kids, like in that order, right? And I don't say those things like to be judgy. I'm trying to say those things as to help give the best counsel I can from my life experience. I've seen people have very hard life and I've seen people have easier life. All life can be hard, but what advice can I give to somebody that can help them live the best life? And that advice is going to be conservative. Be conservative with your money, all the kind of things I'm going to say. And then the third thing with being Republican, well, Republican versus Democrat, those are policies, right? Those are policy issues. Like I'm a Republican because if I look at policy, I align very strongly with Republican policy issues, right? So if I meet somebody and they say, "Hey, John, there's one issue, like, let's just pick one. Hey, I want the tax rate to be high as possible. I want as big as government possible." I'm like, "Hey, like you should vote Democrat. I want smaller government. I want more freedom. I want lower taxes," right? So that's a policy issue. That's not a faith issue or an ideological issue. That's a policy issue. But I put them in that order because that's the order of importance to me, right? Not everybody puts them in that order. And I don't like it when people confuse issues, right? Like, can you be a Democrat and be a patriot? Absolutely. Do I meet Republicans that are racist? I don't. All the Republicans I know are good people. They're not racist. Like, you can be wealthy and pay a lot of taxes. Like, so people start switching things around. Like, to say, "Oh, that person's a Republican, they must be a racist." That is a very inappropriate, untrue thing to say. And people say that because they're trying to get political support, not necessarily support, and I think kind of in a healthy way. Does that make sense? Or like somebody might say, "Oh, well, you can't be a Christian and be a Democrat." And I'm like, "Well, my mom's a Democrat and she's a Christian, so I disagree with that." And I have been with, members of Congress who are Democrats in worship services. I know lots of Democrats that are Christians. So I don't think that's fair, that labeling, but I'm trying to also kind of give it context. Now, if you make that jump over to HBCUs, my life experience with HBCUs has been very, very strong. I believe they play a critical role in our nation. And I think there's a lot of alignment. And when I think about real issues our nation's facing, real issues, not hot issues people love to talk about, but actual core issues that we're dealing with, and we can talk about those. I believe HBCUs can play a critical role in solving those problems.
That makes a lot of sense. Want to jump into double tap into something that you just said. You said your mom's a Democrat.
Mm-hmm.
Most people go with the same party that their parents are. Mm-hmm. Someone like me, and my father's a Democrat, my mother's a Democrat, I'm a Democrat, and I'm not big into politics, but I just kind of went their way. And my dad's a political guy. He was a political science guy. What made you go in a different direction than your mother, who's someone that pretty much made you who you are?
Well, I think that sometimes, first off, I think that we agree on the Christianity first part, right? So we align there. My mom's pretty conservative, so we align there. So it's not the lead, it's the back part. So I think that's kind of the first part. The second thing is like certainly parties change, right? And parties change can be different geographically, right? So when my parents were really ramping up in the 60s and 70s, had I been alive then, what party would I have aligned with and sort of gotten centered in? Who knows, right? So I grew up in a different era, and I grew up, in the 80s. I was born in 71, in the 80s with Ronald Reagan, and then really my first campaign or election to vote in, was when Bill Clinton was running for office, and I did not connect with President Clinton. I find out I've met President Clinton, and he's one of the most impressive people I've ever met. So I give him a lot of respect. Some things he's done, but I just didn't align with him. So it's certainly there's an influence, and I have respect for the Democratic Party. I have met with lots of Democrat leaders, and I completely respect them, and I respect President Biden. But I just, in my own worldview, my own story, the policy doesn't line up. I'll tell you this: one time, I considered myself kind of a moderate for many years, and so one time I went on took an online test on all these issues to say, are you Republican or Democrat? And I came back very, very Republican. Like, it sort of surprised me, but I was like, oh wow, I never really thought about it. But on another sense, like, man, I do what I do regardless who's in the White House. Like, the stuff I do, if I was like, look, if Trump won or Biden won, it doesn't change who I am and what I'm doing. And whoever's in the White House, I'm doing my thing, and if it makes sense to connect with them, I will.
Now, also in the tweet were, let me give a little context to people that haven't seen the tweet. The tweet was a bunch of tweets, so it was pretty much a thread, and in the thread it said a lot of different things. So you say you've guest lectured at a bunch of universities.
Over 30.
Over 30.
Mm-hmm.
And the most impressive students are at FAMU.
Correct.
I'm pretty sure you don't know I'm a FAMU guy.
What?
I'm a FAMU guy.
Yay!
So you can see how that really drew me to you. I'm said, it's magical at FAMU, and it's hard to say that to people that haven't experienced it. Why are FAMU students so impressive, and what do you think they do at FAMU better than at other schools that make their students top notch? Do you think it's the recruitment? Is it the training? Is it the focus on the professional and soft skills? Talk to me about what you think.
Well, I want to answer that question with a short answer, and then I want to give you a background a little bit. First off, I think it's culture. I think it's all of it. I think it's so strong. It's not one thing. Like, you can't say it's this and this and this, because it's all of it. It's the alumni, it's the history, it's all these things. So let me give this context. So I've guest lectured at Wharton in Columbia, and spoken at Ole Miss, North Carolina, Florida State, University of Miami. So lots and lots of universities, big and small, that kind of stuff. When you come in as a guest lecturer, you go into class, and the students are nice. They're all nice and kind and things like that. Most of the time they're in shorts or, jeans or whatever, and t-shirt, baseball cap, that kind of thing. And when you're lecturing, the students have dead eyes. They're like that. And I said to my wife one time, I was like, why do they always have such dead eyes? And she said, well, they don't want you to call on them. They don't want to ask a question. And so you, as a lecturer, you have that experience. And then the part two is, I always say that in my lectures, I'll say, hey, do you have any questions or anything you would like to ask me or you want to talk about? And overwhelmingly, it's like just crickets. There's just complete silence. So then you go to Florida A&M, okay? You walk to the classroom, and there's 80 students, and they're all in suits, every single one of them. And you're like, whoa, like, this is impressive. And then you're talking, and they're making eye contact, and they're responding, and they're listening, and you can tell they're engaged. And then you say, are there any questions? And 80 hands go up, okay? And you're like, whoa, like, you're not able to get to all of them. And so you're like, you. And you know where this is going. Every one of them stands up. Hello, my name is John Crossman. I'm a junior from Fort Lauderdale. Like, they professionally introduce themselves. And then they ask a question that's kind of like inspiring and kind of terrifying. Like, they'll be like, Mr. Crossman, in 1997, what? You're like, this kid. And so as a speaker, I'm just telling you, I spoke on Wednesday at the U.S. Capitol. And I said this, there were members of Congress in the room. And I said, if I took every member of Congress with me to all 30 speeches and said, you could come back to one, I said 100% of you would say Florida A&M University. That's what you as a speaker, it's such a powerful experience, right? You just don't see anything like that. And more specifically to FAMU, and this is because I love the state of Florida, I'm born and raised here, we lose a lot of great students to other states because other states and companies outside of Florida have got it figured out how powerful FAMU is, over a lot of corporations in our own state, right? I just want to jump to say this because it's an important point I was trying to make. It's like diversity does not lower the bar. Diversity widens the net, right? So was the 1965 University of Alabama football team the best representative of athletes in the state of Alabama? Of course not. That was not. They had white defensive backs. That's a joke, but I mean, it's true. But it's ridiculous. It was because of diversity. The University of Alabama football team got better, right? Diversity made them a better team, not a lower team. They're better. So I always tell people, like, look, keep recruiting from your alma mater. I'm never going to tell somebody that graduated from University of Connecticut or UMass or Oregon to not recruit at their own university. Recruit a university and add HBCUs, right? Add HBCUs. I kid you not. I got asked a year and a half to guest lecture at a company that was very self-proclaimed woke. They asked me if I wanted water. They didn't give me a bottle of water. They gave me a carton of water because they're so sensitive about the environment. And they asked me to talk about my thoughts on diversity. And I started talking about FAMU. Would you believe this? I could see their faces drop. They recruit every year at FSU. They've never been to FAMU.
Wow.
And this is a company that's self-proclaimed, like, we're so committed to diversity. And I said, like, guys, they're 2 blocks away. Like, they're looking at each other. It's not like you have to take an Uber, like it's right there. They're right there together. And so, to me, it's like to try to educate more companies to just visit HBCU and recruit their students. And look, I'm telling you, like, pound for pound, pure IQ, business acumen, potential to be the next great Warren Buffett or you name some great business mind, whoever it is. FAMU has that. Okay, they have that. There's no question about it. Other HBCUs that maybe have some students where their average SAT score is lower. There's some other, not all HBCUs are the same. They're hierarchical in different ways. You know that. Does that mean you shouldn't recruit those schools? Man, no, it isn't. Because I'm telling you, sometimes that kid that was that C to B student in high school and did just kind of okay on the SAT, and they just kind of get into college, and they get into a college that was easier for them to get into because they couldn't get in this bigger, well-known state university. Sometimes they get in that college and something clicks, and they really start to take off. And that kid that had to take a bus to work, the kid that had a learning disability but it was undiagnosed and they had to figure out how to get through life, that kid's got grit. They're tough. They've got energy. They got desire. And I'm telling you, for some jobs, you're like, well, John, we need to interview the best kids at the University of Virginia. I'm like, maybe for some jobs, but I'm telling you, for other jobs, they're not the best kids. I don't care if their average was a 1500 SAT. That doesn't mean they're going to be the best salesperson. That doesn't mean they're going to be the best at, hospitality. It doesn't mean they're going to be best at all kinds of other things that require different kind of skill sets. The way we kind of like camp intelligence out as far as like, they got this SAT and they got this GPA, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be the best candidate for this job. So I'm telling you, if you just said, hey, John, I just want to recruit at the best, okay, recruit at Stanford, recruit at Princeton, recruit at Harvard, and FAMU. Those are all on the same. Those are all on the same line in my mind. Okay, they're all the same. If you said, hey, John, I want to recruit because I want to recruit kids that I think can become superstars, I think there's other HBCUs that I would add all over the country that also have superstar potential for different reasons.
Now, talk to me about that, because you're a businessman. I'm a businessman. When you're looking at potential employees, and I know you've got it wrong a bunch of times because I've got it wrong a bunch of times. And I have a super high EQ. When you reverse engineer who worked out the best and who are your best employees, give me 2 or 3 things or 2 or 3 traits that they all had.
The first thing I'd say that jumps to my mind is they don't need an alarm clock, right? You don't have to tell them be here at 8:30. They're going to be at their desk at 7:45, and they're going to leave when the job's done. Some people their whole life look at a job like the job they had in high school. Like when I work at Subway, I work from blank to blank. That's my shift. When you meet people that become professionals, when you're a professional, you're that when your eyes open. You're that professional when you're in the shower, right? That's the difference. And I think that young people that quickly realize this is not a job, I'm a professional. And there are 22-year-olds that act like professionals. They get it. And that's what I'm looking for. Like that kid that is ready to move into this another area of life and make things happen. So I think in the part of its desire, part of its passion. I think another big one is being coachable. They have the humility that they'll ask a question, and they'll take feedback. They want to get better. The opposite is kids that are prideful. Yeah, that's not going to work. And then I also think that being creative, being a problem solver, right? Like I always reference this. I know a guy, and he told me one time, he goes, "My favorite employee is so and so because they do exactly what I tell them to do." And that sounds good, but it's actually kind of terrible because what that means is like they as a boss are always right and the employee is always wrong. They just need to do what they're told. Well, if you want to have mindless drones, then I guess that is the right person for you. But for me, because I need to have salespeople working for me, I need people who go further. That you give them the concept, and then they figure the best path, right? And so it's not about doing it my way or the way I listen. The way I did it when I came out of college, there was no internet, right? So the way I did it doesn't apply, and the way things are going to happen in the future could be something totally different. So I need a kid that like understands the concept of what we're trying to do, but they're going to be creative to figure out what's the best way to get the job done.
And that's a little naive of leaders to think that they're supposed to do what we tell them to do, because anybody that's been around long enough knows that we work for them. It's
Yep.
not that they work for us.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that leads to a lot of naivety in the leaders, and that can tell you a lot about the leaders when you talk to them.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Now, I want to double click in here. You wrote a book,
Mm-hmm.
Career Killers, Career Builders.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about not only who the book is for and what the aim is. Talk to me about being an author, how you came to be one, the challenges, and maybe some unforeseen fulfillment that you've got from becoming an author.
Sure. So, first up, I'm dyslexic. I didn't know that until I was in my 40s. And so I'm not a writer. What I am is a speaker. And one of the things that I learned about being dyslexic, I can write an entire speech in my head and recite it and never write anything down. Right. So that's a unique, but again, that's why I'm sensitive to some people because I academically wouldn't be great. I don't have a great background, an okay background, but I would never have a great background. But I can do some of the things other people can't because of my own things I've had to overcome. So for years, I've been asked to guest lecture at colleges. And so as I've done that, I talk about real estate investment, talk about different careers in real estate, that kind of stuff. One time I got asked to lecture at the University of Florida. And honestly, at a level, I was a little bit bored. And I was trying to think about what's a lecture I would give to these kids that I haven't given before. And I started sort of daydreaming about it. And I'm thinking, man, if you go to a great college, like Ohio State or Florida, something like that, and you're talking to a bunch of 20-year-olds, what should those kids look like in 10 years? Well, if you're at some of these fine universities, these kids never made a B in their whole life. I barely made a B because I was all C's, but these kids never made a B their whole life. So what's going to be happening to them in 10 years? And when I think about life, people talk about somebody having a midlife crisis, like I'm 51, like, what happens to people when they're going through different changes. I think the most crucial area as an adult is between 30 to 34. I think that's a real pivotal time. The reason why I think it's pivotal is because if you're 32 and you're like, you know what, I want to change careers, you can do that. My dad was a business guy that then became a pastor in his early 30s, right? If you're 32 and you're unhappy in your marriage, you're like, I'm going to get divorced and get remarried and then have kids. That happens, right? And that's sad and how that happens, but it happens. It's good. They build on their lives, right? At 51, I'm not doing that. Like, I'm set. I'm going this direction. So in my brain, I'm like, okay, I'm talking to these successful 20-year-olds. What are they going to look like when they're 32? How can I help them to be really successful? Because some of those kids will be successful at 32, but some of them are going to be bankrupt. Some are going to be twice divorced. Some of them are going to be dead, right? And we all know stories. We could go, Aaron Hernandez, right? Aaron Hernandez. I mean, how did that happen? Watch that Netflix documentary, and you're like, how does a guy, the youngest starting player in the NFL, and went to the University of Florida and all that kind of crazy stuff, how does he then can become a murderer, right? Like, and there's less dramatic, but when we think about Anthony Bourdain or Kate Spade or Robin Williams or like all these different kind of people we could have commit suicide, or lesser than that, Matt Lauer, people have careers and mess it up. So I wrote the book. Oh, anyway, so I wrote this speech, and I called the speech "The Top 5 Ways to Get Fired and the Top 5 Ways to Keep from Being Fired." And I gave that speech at the University of Florida. It has nothing to do with real estate. It has nothing to do with retail or shopping centers, which is really where I've done most of my work. And that speech became my most requested speech. I had people all across the country like, can you come give that speech? So I knew, like, man, we kind of got something with this, that this is hitting something. I spoke at Full Sail University, and they have a lot of kids that are, artists and stuff like that. I spoke for 45 minutes. The Q&A went 45 minutes. I finally had to say, man, I got to sit down, right? But I started talking about mental health and things like that, and addiction and how we deal with addiction. And they just kept asking questions. And so it went really well. So I knew I had something. So I wanted to do the book because I wanted to be able to kind of scale up and leverage that out. And I hired a ghostwriter to help me with it because I'm not a writer. And what I would do is I would record every chapter and then send it to him, and then he would write it for me. And so I wanted to make sure the book sounds like me. It's my thoughts. It just was written in air. So that's how I pulled it off. I would say this to anyone who's thinking about writing a book. It's kind of like this. If you came to me and you're like, hey, John, I would like to 1 year run a marathon. I'd be like, that's awesome. That's a good goal. Like, I mean, and I've run one marathon in my life. I don't want to do it again, but I'm glad I did it. It was a good experience. Don't want to do it again. So most people you and I know, if they said in 1 year, I want to run a marathon, they could do it. If you came to me and said, hey, John, in 1 year, I want to run Boston Marathon. Whoa, that's a whole nother conversation. Like, you're basically saying you're gonna work a part-time job. I mean, you want to run Boston, your whole life has got to be about that. That's very hard. So the analogy is like this. If you came to me and said, hey, John, I want to write a book, and 1 year I want to have a published book, that's my goal. I'd say you can do it. Totally, you can do it. If you came to me and said, hey, John, I want to write a book, and in 1 year I want it to be a bestseller or to be profitable, I say, that's not a good goal. That's like saying you're going to run Boston. So, anybody who sees this and they're like, hey, I want to write a book, I encourage you to do it, because I think if you have that inside of you and you want to get that out and share the world, it's most people want to write a book. Most people don't do it. So if you do that, I think that's a great thing. You just got to understand that if you write a book and it sells 500 copies, that is successful, right? Someone says, oh, I'm going to write a book and I want it to become a bestseller. I'm like, dude, unless you win a gold medal, land a plane on the Hudson, have a baby with Nick Cannon. I don't know, right? Like, unless you got something that's just kind of ridiculous, like it's just not going to sell. So you have to look in your heart, like, what's the motivation? So what was my motivation for writing my book? It was to help people. That's motivation. I keep copies of my book with me all the time. And like when I valet my car and I was tipped well. And then I say, hey, you a student? And then I'll say, why don't you take this book? I enjoy giving my book away. I enjoy giving it to people. I give it to college students, and it blesses me to say, hey, why don't you read this? And hopefully this will be helpful to you. So, it's been a money loser, but that's not why I did it. Right. So you have to sort of like, what's your motivation and what you're trying to accomplish, and then be realistic of the goal.
That's great advice for anyone that's about to become an author, because you probably know we get pitched by authors all the time. And I see that they come in with very unrealistic expectations of their book. So,
at least I'll say this to you, that my publisher told me that I need to have at least 50 reviews of my book. If you look at my book, I have 204 reviews, which is great. But I'm telling you, to get to 204 reviews, when I say I probably have asked at least 2,000 people. I'm telling you, people I know. I've said, hey, Joe, we've been friends for 20 years. Can you make sure to review my book? and they say yes. If I ask them and they say yes, there's a 10% chance they're going to review the book.
And that's still a good percentage, because
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
3% is about normal.
Yeah. People you know in your whole life, you think, oh, all my friends are going to buy my book. No, they're not. They're not.
They're not.
So you got to just understand that. But again, it's still, to do it. It was cathartic and helpful, and it itched a scratch for me, which was good.
I'm going to get a little selfish, because you're tapping into a lot of different things that I want to know more about. And over the last 3 years, people have started to ask me to give speeches, and I've done them. I've got paid for them, and it's a world that I knew nothing about. I started to find out about speakers bureaus and how they place people and all those types of things. If someone wants to have a career as a speaker, you have to be successful. You have to have something to talk about. What would be your advice in how to become a prolific speaker? Not only giving good speeches, but getting to be able to speak.
Yeah, so there's two parts about that jump out that are kind of like the whole thing. The first one is like practice, practice, practice. I mean, it's just like, if you've ever read the book, it was Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. He talked about that rule of 10,000 hours. And, this famous story is how the Beatles, when they came to America, and you see that footage of the Ed Sullivan Show, they're singing, the audience is going crazy, and they're completely relaxed. Like, how does that happen? How it happens is they went to Germany and did all these live shows, 1,000 live shows in Germany before they came to America, right? So people don't understand, like, it looked easy. It wasn't easy. It just appeared to, because they had so many hours in. And so if you want to be a speaker, man, you got to speak. You got to speak all the time, everywhere you can. And I've had years of my life, I gave a lot of speeches in years of life that I didn't. And when I had time that I didn't, and I wanted to get back into it, I just, everywhere I could, I volunteered to speak. And even if it's like, if say I'm in a big group, 100 people, and there's a speaker and they're like, do you have any questions? I'd be like, I do. And I would just like ask a question to try to get my confidence back up, because if you're not in the rhythm, it's just like anything else in life. Ask Steph Curry about shooting 3-pointers, right? Like, you have got to keep. So you got to get as many reps as possible. I got a friend of mine named John Rivers, and he told me, and he's a business guy, he's a Christian guy. And he said that anytime anyone asks him to come someplace and share his faith, if he's available, he says yes for free. And I was like, that's cool. And so I've had a bit of that mentality too, that like, if it's a nonprofit and they want a speaker and I'm available, I just say yes. And I think that's good, because again, I'm out there. It's good for me. It's good for them. Hopefully there's that rhythm. So there's that. The second part, as far as being paid, man, all of business is a grind, all of it, everywhere, all the time. I have known people that made $40,000 a year. I know people make $400,000 a year. I know people that make $4 million a year. I don't know anybody that makes over $100,000 a year that doesn't grind all the time. I just don't. Like, I think some people think, oh man, I work 9 to 5 and I make 40,000. Wouldn't it be great to make 400? I'm like, you make 400? You're working 12 hours a day, 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, probably Sunday too. Even if you go on vacation. I had a guy one time, and he said, I heard that some people, when they go on vacations, they bring their laptops and take their cell phones with them. I'm like, you don't? Like, I don't know what you're talking about. I had times where I used to do this thing on Thanksgiving morning. I'd get up early and I would send an email to certain people, just, I mixed up every year, and I'd say, hey, I'm being thankful. I want to thank to you what you're doing. If they're a CEO, it could be a Fortune 500 company. I email them Thanksgiving morning. They email back. Christmas Day. They work, right? So giving a speech is awesome. It's funny. It's great giving a speech. And then once you get done, you got to deal with kind of crazy people, ask you crazy questions, and people. That's part of it too. I know a pastor one time, he got in this thing where he would give his sermon, then walk back into a green room, and then not come back out to the next service, and then come back out. And his career did not end well. I'm going to tell you that, it did not end well. And I think part of it was like, when you remove yourself from the gritty part of it, you're not dealing with the reality, right? My dad, as a pastor, he would always walk to the back of the congregation, and when you walked out, he should raise his hand. I remember being a kid and him saying, "This dude said something so crazy." Well, sometimes people say things that either they're kind of crazy or weird. Sometimes they're helpful, right? Because they'll say something like, "Oh, you make weird hand gestures," or "Oh, you reference this, you reference that." Like, I remember one time I referenced Elvis, and somebody walking out was like, "Oh man, Elvis was a racist. You don't ever say Elvis, he was racist." And I was like, "What?" And I looked it up. That's actually a rumor. It's not true, but people believe it to be true, right? So I was like, "Huh." So like I'll switch up jokes. Like there's sometimes I'll say a joke. It's funny in my head, but then it doesn't hit well with some audience or whatever. But you got to know. Or sometimes something comes across offensive. You didn't mean to be offensive, but like, so you got to be able to take a lot of feedback. But if you want to be successful at it, man, you got to grind it. I mean, it's not my full-time job. I've got paid to do it. I like doing it. I'll do it again. I get a lot out of it. But if you want to do it, do it. It's a legit pounding it hard all the time thing. Super hard.
That's how you know if someone's really the truth, if they talk about how hard it is and if it's a grind. If people don't talk about it as a grind, I know you're not in it for real.
No.
Now, you're a good storyteller, I see. And facts tell, stories sell. I'm not a great storyteller. I'm a fact guy. I'm a factual boom, boom, boom. How do I become a better storyteller? Or how would anyone become a better storyteller?
Well, I hear you on that. There's that old expression in Texas, is like, "Don't let the facts get in the way of a good story." I think that's how that goes. Listen, I would argue the greatest teacher in the history of humanity was Jesus, and Jesus taught through parables, right? So, we could go around and tell people, "Hey, be nice to each other," but somehow the Good Samaritan speaks to people's souls. I mean, we could go all around the world and say, "Do you know the story of the Good Samaritan?" And people know the story of the Good Samaritan. Like there's Samaritan Hospital, Samaritan this, and they know it because of that story, right? So I think that maybe what you got to think about is like, what's the underlying truth, and then what's the way to explain the truth in a concept that connects to people. And the other part I would tell you is that I try to be very vulnerable, and I try to like just really tell my truth. Like this is my story. This is what happened to me. And I think that you're a clearly well-educated guy and you're a confident guy, and just with that can be intimidating to people. Like people who are listening to you just like, "Oh, like this guy is a strong guy." And so when you're able to open up and you tell a story about something hard you went through, for me, I was in my early 40s. I had gotten back in shape. I was running 5Ks and winning them. My career was going great, and I was crushing it. I got appointed by Senator Marco Rubio, the Military Academy Appointment Board, which I still do. I've done it like 13 times. So I had a Saturday that I did the appointment board all day. It's like, so I worked all week, all day meeting kids going to the military academy. And then that Sunday, because I'm crazy, I ran a half marathon. Ran the best time of my life, ever going to run. Crossed the finish line. I was like, man, I don't feel good. I saw an ambulance. There was an ambulance. I was like, I almost walked up to the ambulance. I almost walked up because I was like, I don't feel right. So just kind of ignored it, kind of walked it off. Next day was Monday. Didn't know it, walked it off. Next day was Tuesday. I had one meeting, had nothing else on my calendar, and I just drove to the doctor's office, no appointment. I said, man, there's something wrong. And I'll never forget, the nurse was walking me back to the doctor's office. She goes, I think you're suffering from depression. I was like, what? And brother, let me tell you, I got diagnosed with clinical depression. And the doctor told me it was going to take me 1 year to get through it. And it was the worst hell on earth I've ever experienced. It was the worst. I mean, I always tell people, hit pause before you judge somebody that kills themselves. Because if you've not been through clinical depression, you do not know what that's like, right? So for 1 year, I took Klonopin and Zoloft. I lost a ton of weight because I couldn't eat. I had to kind of fake my way through a lot of things in life to try to get through that. And there was a long season. I was really embarrassed about it, and it was hard for me to talk about. But once I was able to like figure out a way to share and tell that story, it helped me so much in empathy and connecting with other people, right? Now, I will tell you, some people don't like it when I talk about it. Some people may think less of me when they hear that story. Some, who knows? But when I've learned to just have the confidence of like, this is my story, this is my humanity, this is who I am, it's created a better and higher intimacy, and it's given me a more full life. So I think that's what I'd say. It's like, what is your truth? And then putting that context of your own feelings and your own story and sharing it. Maybe I'll give you this different example. It was maybe a year ago. Got asked to be on a podcast or some sort of event, was recorded. It was during COVID, so it was on Zoom. And I was with 3 Black women, and it was about race. And I was like, geez, how am I going to be credible? How am I going to talk about this? What am I going to do? So I actually opened with telling the story I just told you. And the context I gave was, I don't know what it's like to be a Black woman. Obviously, I do know what it's like to experience trauma. Like, I have experienced trauma. I know what it's like to look inside the abyss and feel hopelessness. And I said, so I can have empathy to another person's feelings. I can't have empathy towards being racially profiled, but if somebody says, man, I felt trauma, like, I have felt trauma. I have felt that. That sucks, and I hate it. So the panel went great, but it went great not because I was preaching and saying you. I was saying, I've experienced this, and I have compassion for others because of the pain I've been through myself. That really worked.
The further you're willing to go down the truth barrel, the further you go. I say that all the time.
Yeah. Can I share something with you? Can I bring up something real quick?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I just want to talk about this as a subject, because I used to say this kind of in a whisper, and as time keeps going by, I keep saying it louder and louder, and I'm saying it louder and louder because I hope it'll change. But this is a really important topic, and it goes back to the heart of the tweet. So that you referenced me. So when I talk to Black leadership, Republican, Democrat, wherever I go, and I talk about the importance of HBCUs, total support. I mean, of course, total support. I mean, it doesn't take any effort at all. Be like, HBCUs are so important in that. When I talk to white Republicans, conservatives, I get really, really good support. Really good support. Senator Marco Rubio, Senator Rick Scott, former Senator George Lemieux, Jeb Bush, who's a friend of mine. I mean, conservative guys I talk to, and they're like fans of Bethune-Cookman, fans of FAMU, so supportive, right? And of course, and all the friends in that. Who is not supportive? White Democrat. White Democrat. If a white person goes on social media and says they're woke, I'm 100% sure they're never going to give a penny to Florida A&M.
Wow.
100%.
Wow.
But if they're anti-woke and they're white, they're a prospect. So that is a very fascinating dynamic, right? That's a fascinating dynamic, that Black, conservative Republican, HBCUs, that comes together really well. And when I sent the tweet, that went out, my target audience was not alums of HBCUs. My target audience was not Black. My target audience was white, conservative, Christian Republicans, because that is who I'm trying to raise money from. That was the point. It wasn't to them, right? People get mad sometimes when I say that Donald Trump, as president, gave more support to HBCUs than any other U.S. president ever. And I'm like, guys, listen to me. Why am I saying that? I'm not saying that to try to endorse President Trump. I'm not trying to get you to switch your party affiliations. I'm trying to get people that voted for Trump to write checks to HBCUs. That's what I'm trying to do, right? That's not, I'm trying to get somebody to switch parties. I'm trying to say, now I will say this. Do I want HBCU grads in the inner circle of the Republican Party? Yes. Yes, I do. I also want them in the Democratic Party. Yes, I do. Absolutely. I would love to see large Republican student groups at HBCUs and large Democratic recruits at HBCUs. Why is that? Because if Democrats believe they always have the Black vote, and Republicans believe they'll never have the Black vote, the Black vote has lost its power. We need Democrats and Republicans going, Florida A&M, we need to make sure they're happy and pleased with us. We need to be going by and talking to them. Florida A&M College of Law. It's located in downtown Orlando. It's in the heart of the I-4 corridor. I hope every single presidential candidate, Republican, Democrat, looks at the map and goes, man, California's going blue, Texas going red, Florida, we don't know. I-4 corridor, big old circle, FAMU College of Law. I'm a Republican. I'm a Democrat. I better show up there. I better show up there and meet with leadership, because by golly, I better be listening and talking to those folks. That's important to me. So for me, I don't go. I will never ask you for a penny for Florida A&M. Not doing it. Not my job. My job is to get people who don't know what FAMU is. They can't even pronounce it right, but their heart is good. Or their heart's open to being good. Let's say it like that. And they have influence and they have affluence. And I can go to them and say, hey, FAMU, Bethune-Cookman, Howard, Morehouse, Spelman, Clark, Fisk, these places can help you solve your problems. Let me think about this. When I spoke at the Capitol, I told that audience, I'm like, if you're a small or medium-sized company, don't create a DEI committee. Don't do it. Take all the money and time and energy you would put in the committee and just adopt your local HBCU. You're gonna say, oh, we're gonna hire a head of DEI. We're gonna pay them $95,000 a year plus benefits, blah, 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 blah. We're in for 120 grand a year for the next 5 years. No, write the $120,000 check to an HBCU, or maybe pick 4, cut it up, and adopt them and guest lecture. I had a guy tell me, I'm a constitutional attorney. Well, believe in the Constitution. Great. Why don't you write a big check, endow a scholarship, FAMU College of Law, and then volunteer to guest lecture every semester? And you can go in as a practicing attorney and say, I'm a constitutional attorney, and you can share that, and they can listen to you. Doesn't mean I agree with you, but that's part of the educational. Let's get exposure to all kinds of people, right? So these companies are creating these DEI. They don't even know what they're doing. And it's all over the place. And then they start talking about CRT and all this kind of crap. Guys, stop. Go back to these universities, invest in them, write the check, show up, mentor, guest lecture, bring the interns in, bring the students in, develop a relationship, right? Coach and listen and receive, and then hire those alums, right? That's the game changer. That's the thing that needs to be changing going forward, right? And by the way, you should have some friends that are Republican, they're Black. And you should have friends that are independent. And you should have some friends that are Democrat. And you can disagree on policy issues. You can say, gosh, I think more taxes, less taxes, or, abortion or gun control. And you can disagree and be best friends. You can disagree and be best friends as long as your heart is in the right place of trying to help society, right?
You absolutely should. And you touched on a topic there where when you look at the facts, and this is hard for me to say. This is a tough thing for me to say, John. When you look at the facts, President Trump did more for HBCUs than President Obama. These are just the facts when you look how everything is laid out. And me being a Black man that lived in Chicago for over 10 years, I'm an Obama guy. My son was born the year Obama was elected. So for the first 8 years of his life, he knew as a Black man, you could be president.
Huge.
There was never another time where that could be your beginning thought as a young Black boy.
Yeah.
Now, when you wrote the tweet and we posted it, it had hundreds of comments. Yeah. What was most impressive to me is that you got in the comment section and responded to most of the comments.
All of them. Yeah.
And one of my strategies when I first started HBCU grad, and from 2016 to 2020, I would stay up late at night, bleeding in the eyes, responding to every single comment. Mm-hmm. And that is a tactic that most people won't do. Where did your humility come from in being able to listen and disagree? And another part of that is understanding media, because often people are my age and don't understand this new world. And I'm a 41-year-old man. Mm-hmm. You're a 51-year-old man, and you understand how important that is. And I'm going to read a quote from someone that responded to one of your comments. Mm-hmm. Quote, I can't speak for anyone else, but I am intrigued and impressed by the way he is in the comments, taking all of the critiques, not arguing with those who oppose him, and explaining himself as he listens to what my HBCU peers are saying. He all up and down the comments. That takes courage if nothing else. Where does all this come from? Is this strategy? Is this tactic? Or is
Well,
this just who you are, John?
so let me say this to you. I believe our nation is facing some very, very big challenges. And I believe the greatest opportunity for solution to those challenges will come out of an HBCU grad. That's what I believe. I believe that HBCU grads have more power and influence than I'm going to have. I do have in many ways. There's things you could say that I can't say. There's things I could say that I'd be over for me, right? And you could say. And so for the sake of my children and future generations, this is what I believe. So my goal is to try to promote and educate in HBCU world. And so it's an important topic, right? So there's other topics, if I start talking about, college football or something like that, somebody starts saying something crazy. I don't care enough, right? But this topic is really important to me, right? I've been around it my entire life. This is very important. And look, I throw tweets out here and there. I don't know where they're going to go viral. I don't know what's going to happen. And I didn't think I'd ever have anything go viral, but that one did. And then when it was on your page, and thank you again for sharing that, and people were giving comments back, I was like, hey, this is an important topic. Let's take this conversation further. So that's where that comes from. The second part with responding to comments, everyone, I respect people having their opinion, right? Like you say you're a Democrat, I'm saying Republican, but what they wouldn't even argue about that. You're like, hey, I respect that. My dad was a lifelong Democrat. That's a good thing. So we start with, I always try to thank people, like, thank you for sharing your opinion. Like there's just a humanity in being kind to people, right? And then the second part is like, it's okay to disagree. I was intrigued by, on the tweet, people kept saying, I think maybe some on the Instagram post too, they kept saying, well, I'm not voting for him until I know how he feels about other issues. And I was like, I'm not running for office. I thought it was funny when people would say things like, well, I want to see what kind of tax breaks he gets for giving HBCUs. Like, do you really think that my donations HBC, how would that even work? Like, I don't know what that even means. Like, so they're questioning it. But I tell you that overwhelmingly, way overwhelmingly, the feedback was positive. There was a handful of people, and one of the people on the Instagram on your post, they would not let up that in their heart and mind, I was a bad dude. They would not stop. Their comment after comment after comment. And even though I was kind to them, and I finally said, I hope someday you open up your heart. That was my last thing I said. I was like, I hope you open up your heart. But if you're living in a space that you literally believe all Republicans are racist, or all white people are racist, or all conservatives are, I don't know why you live in this country. Like, how could you possibly believe that? My youngest daughter and I were having this conversation about racism yesterday. She's like, Dad, I think that word gets overused. And I said to her, well, let me talk about something. Our family tree goes to Ohio. Well, we have a medal that my ancestor Crossman won fighting for the Union. Civil War is about slavery. Who died fighting the Civil War? Who won? White guys. That's happened, right? A lot of white men have died fighting to free slaves and to do the right thing. Doesn't mean a lot of bad. There, of course, are bad, but there's a lot of really good people, and there's a lot of really good Republicans. And because someone's a policy is Republican, that doesn't make them a racist. And here's the thing: if we want HBCUs to survive and thrive, we must have bipartisan support. It must be. So I was very thankful for that. I was very thankful for the dialogue, and I was thankful for the opportunity. I enjoyed it. I thought there was a lot of healthy exchange there. I will tell you that I'm a trustee for Bethune-Cookman University. And the reason why I'm laughing is that there are big haters on me in that world, big haters. And that was the funniest one was there's official BCU social media. And I comment on there all the time. And I'm very accessible. People can DM me. I'll give my cell phone number. would call me. Well, there's these rogue BCU social media. And I went on there and I commented. I said, hey, my name's John Crossman. Happy to talk to you. I got banned, blocked. They don't want to hear it. And so, that makes me crazy. So you didn't ban and block me. You let me talk. And I'm like, well, hey, if somebody's going to give me the chance to talk and have exchange, I mean, on that rogue stuff, they're like, oh, BCU trustees are all these terrible things. And my whole thing is like, hey, man, get to know me and then hate me, right? Like, how could you hate me? You don't even know me. You don't even know my story, right? I mean, I don't know if you and I have talked about this, but we always had this thought that about our ancestry. And so finally, a couple of years ago, my mom and I did Ancestry.com. I have the Nigerian spinner gene. My grandfather was biracial. My great grandfather was black. Like, I don't lead with that. But when you ask me to do my family tree, it doesn't take much. Like, that was a black man. And by the way, his parents, I can't find anything about them. Why? Yeah. Because of racism. That's why. And I can tell you stories about that. But part of this body, part of this DNA came to this country in slavery. It's part of the story. It's part of who I am. And so I care about that, right? So I might look one way, but until you know full context and understand where someone's from, you need to understand that. And again, we can still disagree, but man, we can disagree and be kind to one another. I'm always amazed at mean Christians. Do you ever get that? Like, people that lead with their faith and then, God, they're so mean. I just don't understand that. But
yeah. Let's talk fundraising. And HBCUs need to fundraise.
Yep.
You've done a lot of fundraising in your career. What are some best practices in fundraising from your experiences? And if you were consulting all HBCUs on how to fundraise, what would your suggestions be?
So first off, cultural, okay? What is the job of a college president? The job of a college president is to fundraise. If somebody listening says, oh, my dream is to be a college president. I want to be the president of Howard. I want to be the president of, FAMU, president, whatever. I'm telling you, you better learn how to raise money, because that is the number one job of a college president, okay? All colleges have deans, okay? So if you're a dean and you're like, someday I want to be a college president, well, those deans better raise money, right? Like, a great college should have a president, should have deans, and over 20 years, we should look at some of those deans then going on to be college presidents someplace else, right? But how you make that jump from dean to college president is by raising money. The dean of Florida State University's College of Music raised $60 million last year. $60 million, okay? Dean Hartline, FSU, College of Business, the guy raised over $300 million. The guy's amazing, right? In HBCU culture, this is an overarching statement that I believe to be true. A lot of deans are not fundraising. It's like they got in that position, they earned it from being an outstanding professor, being an outstanding associate dean. They're super smart, they're super well educated, and they're in this dean role, but they don't raise money, right? And across HBCU world, we have to figure that out. And when I say figure that out, we got to go to these deans and say, hey, deans, you got to add this tool to your toolbox. And if you don't know how to do it, we need to get you the training you need to get the tools in your toolbox, right? And then we've got to build you up and help you do that. And then some deans may want to retire and move on. But as we get new deans in, they've got to be raising money. So to answer your question, it takes a strategy, right? It takes a strategy. It takes work. It takes intentionality. It takes trackability. It takes relationships. You got to show ROI, man. You got to show ROI. Yeah. HBCUs have got to show tight governance. Governance is key. People are not going to give you money if they feel like you're not spending it well. If you're not showing accountability about where is the money going, you can't just take the check and what you got to understand that. And here's the other key thing: you got to go where the money is. So if you and I both graduated from, let's pick University of California University, and you're like, John, let's go there, and we went there and we're going to raise money, we just go to our alums, right? I mean, that's what most universities do. University of Florida went through its big financial campaign. They started with calling 10 families and asked for 25 million each, and they got it. They started with 250 million from 10 families. Okay. There's no HBCUs out there that their alums can provide the money needed. So the uniqueness in HBCUs is we have alums who need to give. You need to give as an alum because it's part of how schools get ranked. So all alums need to give. Even I kid you not, give $5 a year. I don't care. Give as an alum. There's that. But then we got to move over here and we've got to go after people who have funds, who need to learn and be educated, right? So you would be shocked, maybe you wouldn't be shocked, but if we took every HBCU in America and put them on a map, I bet you if we did a 5-mile radius and we just did a big circle and we said, let's study all the power business leaders in this community within 5 miles of every HBCU and went and visited and said, has anyone ever talked to you about making a donation? I bet you the numbers are terrible, terrible, low, 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 low. But worse than that, it's like a relationship, meaning, hey, would you come to campus? Would you come guest lecture, right? And that's what I keep coming back to. If I said to you, let's go after 500 major corporations and let's ask them to make big, 7-figure gift to FAMU or wherever else. What party do you think they're a member of? Political party. They're probably Republican, right? What skin color are they? Probably white, right? They're probably conservative. You can't hate people to Jesus, right? You want to grow your church and you start telling everybody in your neighborhood they're all going to hell, right? And they're all terrible people. They ain't coming to your church, man. They just shut the church down. That's not how that works, right? But you know what? If you have a great daycare center where people come bring their children and they feel safe there, if you provide, hurricane supplies and stuff like that, great churches are relevant to their communities. People are like, gosh, I didn't go to that church, but I love it because they do things for my community. HBCUs have got to be relevant. They've got to solve the problems. If you have a college of business, you need to be providing great talent and cultivating relationships, right? And so, when you hear me talk about HBCUs, remember, my audience are not Black. My audience is white, Republican, and saying, I want you to come in, I want you to donate, I want you to give money, right? And if the Koch brothers foundation wants to give your HBCU a 7-figure donation, and you're like, oh, no, we can't take it from those guys. Why? What are you talking about? What are you talking about, guys? Like, just because you can only take donations with people that look and sound and talk just like you, it doesn't work that way, right? This is education. We need different people with different views. I think you got to inspire people. I think you got to create a sense of urgency, right? Like, this is an important thing to do now, right? And I think matching, where on a personal level, the best fundraising I do, look, I endowed a scholarship at FAMU. I endowed a scholarship. I have 2 at FAMU, 3 at Bethune-Cookman, and I have 1 at Jackson State. And so FAMU is the easiest one of the FAMU ones. I put in 25 grand. And I go to companies all the time and look, I put in 25 grand. I'm just a regular guy. I'm just asking you to match me. I want you and your company's big, huge company. I'm a little guy. Just match me. I put in 25 grand. Put 25 grand in too. Yeah. I have endowed scholarship. You endow scholarship. And that works. It's para pursue. People see me doing it and they know I'm in, and unless God takes me away, I'm going to be there, and they come in and partner with me, right? So it's not just like, hey, let's go get this company to give this donation to Bethune-Cookman and buy. We need to get a donation, and then we need to get them to be on our board or help sponsor a guest lecture series or and we often don't accentuate the complementary stuff. Like, give you an example, Bethune-Cookman is a Christian university. Why don't we have T.D. Jakes come give a guest sermon? Why don't we have Andy Stanley? Why don't we have I'm trying to think of his name, but another great Rick Warren, right? Why don't we have the best known Christian speakers in America come give sermons there on the campus, right? Doesn't matter what color they are. It's a Christian connectivity, right? Christian community connectivity. And let's bring people together, right? My heart's desire would be to see every major political debate be held on HBCU campus. That's what I want. I wish more HBCUs would play half their games, football games, against SWAC or the MEAC. And the other half, I wish they were playing more and more. Yeah, I wish FAMU would play Stanford and Princeton and Yale and, because I want that alumni. By the way, if you're a Harvard alum, stop giving endowment money. There's no reason anyone should give one nickel to Harvard's endowment. And my dad went to Harvard. I'm not trying to disrespect Harvard, but they don't need any more money. Stop it. Stop giving money to that. Give it someplace that is life-changing, right?
Yeah.
But we have to get more people involved in that process. And people are going to have to get a little bit uncomfortable. They're going to have to start thinking in a bigger mindset. But people are not going to find Fisk. They're not going to find North Carolina AT and go, oh, yeah, let me just write them a check. They're going to be found and get recruited in and get involved in the process, be welcomed to campus, welcome to be part of it, and get involved. I love Jackson State. I think there's so much good and so much potential there. I've got family in Jackson. And when I was visiting Jackson, I was talking to some family about it, and they were talking about how it was the murder capital of America, all these terrible stats. And I was like, well, you know what? I'm just not a guy that wants to sit here and do nothing and let terrible things happen. So I know real estate. So my partner and I endowed the first real estate scholarship at Jackson State University. My next step is to try to find other real estate companies in Jackson to match me and invest there and guest lecture and mentor the students, right? But I want you to hear me say this. I don't encounter racism. When I was a kid, I heard racist things by people all the time. I saw racism. I don't encounter racism, but what I do encounter regularly is elitism. Elitism and racism are roommates, right? And when I've been places and I've said that, FAMU kids are the most impressive, there's some UF grads have been angry at me for saying that, because UF is the best. UF is number one. They'll say that, and you're like, man, come on, right? Come on. It's a big state. We've got a lot of great schools, man. There's enough on the podium for there to be a couple number ones, right? Or number ones for different reasons. You'll be number one in everything, okay? And so the elitism, like looking down on somebody. There's an old mainstream attorney in Orlando, and I went and saw him about FAMU College of Law, and I said, I need your help. He says, John, I only recruit from Florida State. I said, well, so you'll drive 4 hours and 2 hours. You won't go 2 blocks. Oh, well, I had a guy say to me, that FAMU College of Law, it's broken. When you fix it, I'll help you. I told him? I said, go to hell. I said, go to hell. When it's fixed, I don't need you.
Exactly.
I had a white Democrat start yelling at me about some of this stuff, and I looked at him and I said, how much money are you getting FAMU College of Law? He's an attorney downtown. How much money are you getting? Zero? Is zero? I have a scholarship at FAMU College of Law. I'm a white conservative Republican, and you don't. And you're trying to lecture me? I'm like, I'll tell you what, you match me financially and I'll buy you lunch and we'll talk and I'll hear everything you say. But until you write a check, you got no voice. I'll put you on mute. Yeah. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. I know that Christ loves me because Christ chose to sacrifice for me, right? My children and my wife know that I love them because they know I sacrifice for them. That's how someone somebody loves somebody. It's what they choose to sacrifice for. So people say they love something until you ask them to write a check, and then it turns out they like it, right? They like it. They don't love it. If you really love something, you sacrifice for it, right? I'm looking for people and companies that are like, you know what? Maybe I'm not going to go to vacation to Europe this summer. Maybe I'm just going to not go on vacation. Instead, I'm going to take that money and I'm going to endow scholarship at an HBCU. Maybe I'm not going to buy a new car this year. I'm going to sacrifice that. I'm going to help out here. Maybe I'm not going to be on full retirement because I'm going to take some time and I'm going to go volunteer and guest lecture. And by the way, when you start helping out HBCUs, they have problems. You're going to walk in there and go, well, this doesn't work right. Well, no kidding, it's not working right? All of academia has issues. I have 11 scholarships at 7 universities, and so 4 at PWIs and 3 are HBCUs. They're all got problems, man. All of them got problems. And you said, what's the worst one? It's not one of the HBCUs. It's the State University they have so many problems. Universities are hard to work with. They're challenging. Students are hard to work with. They're kids. So it's no simple thing like you're going to do one thing and it's fixed. You're going to have to work and work and work and work and work. But that's the beauty of life when you invest in things and you see something great come out of it. I had breakfast in Washington, D.C. with Thomas Bolin. I met Thomas Bolin when he was 18 years old and was a freshman at FAMU. He is a real estate executive in Washington, D.C. He's doing a great job. And when I meet with him now, you know what I do? I ask for his advice. He was a kid and I was his mentor. And now he mentors me. Listen, my little company, my vice president, the person that's ramping this whole thing up, heir to the throne, she's a FAMU grad. Don't mess with her. She's the real deal, you know? And I'm telling you, like, you invest in these people because it's the right thing to do, but it is so rewarding and so impactful, and it's a different nature. And one more thing on all this is Deion Sanders just learned this. People say to me, I don't know how you work with all these colleges. They're all liberal Marxist institutions trying to, they say that. And I'm like, man, I'm the most conservative, devout capitalist you're ever going to meet. I've been guest lecturing for over 20 years. I've never had that. I lecture to professors ask me all the time. I come, it's like, it's great. Kids, I don't know what you're talking about, like crazy crap. But I'll tell you this. If you want to go talk to a college and you want to start talking about your faith and your Christianity, you need to think about that. If you're at a Christian college, say anything you want. If you're at a state university, you got to think about that a little bit because, sometimes people get uncomfortable and you be thoughtful. Unless it's an HBCU. Mm-hmm. HBCU, you're not going to have a problem talking about your faith. When Deion Sanders was at Jackson State and he would talk about faith, no one questioned it. He went to Colorado and people got mad at him. So if you're a white evangelical and you're like, I love talking about the Lord, well, then go volunteer in HBCU and it's going to be the best time you ever had. Yeah. I'm just telling. What is the argument against what I just said? What is the argument against that? I don't get it, right? So to me, it's like it's HBCUs are the land of milk and honey. Like this is this world that I believe can be so critical to solving the problems in our nation. That's how I feel, right? I'm not saying it's everything. We have lots of, but I can go through issue of things that HBCUs can do. They provide such a network. The only thing that's comparable to them is the military academies. Like if you meet a guy from the Naval Academy, you meet a guy from West Point, they tease each other. They have a lot of funny jokes back and forth. But if you try to pick a fight with the Navy guy, that West Point guy is going to punch you in the face, man. They're going to unite quick. You can't talk to Oklahoma guy and tell him you're helping out Texas and that he's going to be happy with you. But if you're based in Seattle and you endow a scholarship at Fisk and a Howard University grad is interviewing with you in El Paso, they're more likely to apply and interview come in your company because they see what you're doing in Seattle for Fisk. That's a real thing.
Absolutely.
If you choose to endow a scholarship at one HBCU, grads from the other 100 HBCUs will take notice. That is not, tell me where else that's true. There's only 4, military academies, right? I don't know, what are we talking about, guys? Like, so there's 101 HBCUs. So the network is so much better. Yeah. Sometimes people say to me, why do we still need HBCUs? And I'm like, well, do we still need BYU? Right? If you're a Mormon and you live in Miami and you grew up your whole life, not many other Mormon kids, and then you go to BYU and you're around all Mormon kids and it's just poured into you. And then you graduate and then you move, to Boston or something like that. That's never going to leave you. That's such a core part of you. The same thing with the military academies. A lot of colleges have ROTC. FAMU has ROTC. But you know what? If you're a military kid and high school, some kids were into that, but they really weren't. You just went, and then you go to a military academy and it's poured into you. That defines you, right? I had a friend of mine. He came to my office and he said, man, Crossman, you push this HBCU. He goes, isn't the real problem in Black America lack of fathers in homes? I said, okay, all right, I'll cede that to you. If you believe that's the one problem, then don't you think a solution would be for that young Black kid to go to all Black college and then have Black male role models pouring into them? And he looked at me and went, oh my gosh, you're right. Exactly. If you think that's the biggest problem, then you just made my point and you should be backing Black colleges, if that's what you believe. Right?
Absolutely.
Thank you. You just made my point. So the last other big picture thing I'll tell you is that the cancel culture and the wokeness stuff, it's hurt in a lot of ways because it's limited conversation. And we need healthier conversation. And what I mean by that is, I mean true conversation, like the exchange we had on your Instagram page. That was some good conversation, right? Doesn't necessarily agree, but it was good, healthy interchange. And we need to have places healthy interchange. And if we make it so people are so uncomfortable to ask, if they don't feel like, why are HBCUs important? Like they need to be able to ask that question. Like, well, tell me about institutional racism. Like they need to be able to ask it. The thing about a lot of people who are anti-woke, they're not anti-black, they're anti-Marxist, right? Remember we're talking at the beginning about Christian conservative Republican. Well, the people that see wokeism, they're not relating it to race, they're relating it to ideology. They see it as Marxist. They see it as a threat, not race, but to, socialism, to capitalism, right? And if somebody starts saying something that's a threat to capitalism, I'm going to fight you on that because I think capitalism crushes racism. And capitalism is the key to ending racism in America. So I'm a capitalist guy. So if someone's saying that it's really Marxist, so I can see how that can be, right? So that's why someone who's anti-woke is not necessarily anti-HBCU, right? That makes sense? So it's complicated. And so until we get these conversations going, can we help figure that out?
That was one of the most comprehensive, I'll call it a rant.
I'm sorry.
About HBCUs and why people need to support and why they're so important. So I'm gonna stop right there. I'm gonna stop right there. This was great. I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate you supporting HBCUs. I appreciate you really walking the talk. A lot of people talk it, and I don't listen to anyone. I'm one of those that I try not to hear too much so I can kind of stay unique with it. But I did listen to your podcast with the FAMU guy in Chicago. Remind me of his name.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. Was that Thomas Bolin? He's in DC.
No, guy from Chicago, went to Northwestern.
I think of his name. Oh no, Tyrell. It was Tyrell. No,
Tyrell.
Sorry, it was Cliff Goins.
Cliff Goins.
I'm so sorry. I was switching. Cliff Goins. Cliff Goins is the real deal, man.
He is. Yeah, he's the real deal. But let me tell you the first thing that I looked at when I went to your podcast. And what's your podcast name?
So that's the Crossman Conversation, the CEO edition.
Okay. The Crossman Conversation, the CEO edition. The first thing I looked at is when you published your podcast, and it was every week. I always look at consistency when I looking at a publisher and listen. So I said, let me listen to it. And you really did a good job. I love the touch that you put on it on the back end where you gave some feedback and you were talking to, I don't know if it was one of your business partners.
Yeah, it's my producer. Yeah.
And I love how you guys gave feedback on that. I hadn't seen that on a podcast. So I really like how you did that. And then you're really talking to guys that you sit on boards with, guys that you've done business with, and people that are HBCU grads. So I appreciate that. So we're probably going to have a number two. We're going to have a second part of this because it's a lot of stuff that we can talk, and we can talk about business because I can tell you're a business nerd just like I am. And I'm not going to lie. I'm a capitalist pig, John Crossman.
Well, I would tell you this. I want you to hear me say this. So Cliff and I are on the FAMU Foundation board. And when I go to our board meetings, every time what I think to myself is, I am the dumbest, ugliest, poorest guy in this room. I don't know where they got these freaking millionaire models, that are Mensa candidates on it. But, with Cliff, when you listen to that interview, you're like, God, I mean, taking notes. Like it's so much information. Like, how bright is that guy? And I'm telling you, I know 50 FAMU grads like that. 50 that are just like boom, 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 boom. Like it's ridiculous how great that is. The other thing I just want to mention to you is that you may give this some thought. Maybe think about what are the toughest, hardest questions people want to ask me that we want to talk about. To me, I think that trying to get deep and push, I think is really, really good. I don't like I don't like when people say, well, If you're a Democrat, you're not a Christian. Oh, if you're a Republican, you're racist. Come on, man. Come on. Like that stuff is not helpful, but it's helpful to like, storytelling. Like, why does someone believe they believe, or what can we do to solve this problem? What do we need to do? Like, what's worked in the past? What's happened in the past? Like, sometimes I'll hear people say, well, we've made no progress as a country. What the hell are you talking about? We made no progress. Do you know what it was like in freaking 1840? I'm sure it was hell on earth. What was it like in 1920? What was it like in 1962? It's a lot better, guys. It doesn't mean it's perfect, but it's a lot better, right? What's worked in the past? What hasn't worked in the past? What do we need to do to get to the next level? And I do want to say this because I always like pointing this out. There's principles and there's power, right? And if you focus on power, often you'll let go of principles. If you focus on principles, you let go of power, right? So I'm not going to give up my Christian faith. I'm not going to do that. But I'll give up a potential political career. I had a guy call me the other day. He said, you need to run for governor. I said, neither party will take me. He goes, what do you mean? I said, well, I'm a conservative, but there's pictures of me with Michelle Obama. There's pictures of me with Nancy Pelosi. And I was honored to meet them. I was honored to meet them. Michelle Obama may be the most impressive person I've ever met in my life.
Wow.
Now, again, do I agree with her politically? Probably not. But I respect her. I admire her. I was starstruck a little bit. Now, this is recorded. So if I was running for political office, what I just said would be repeated over and over and over again. But I say it because it's important to say. I spoke at a Young Republicans Club event. I was talking to this audience, and I said, I put a picture of me and Michelle Obama up on social media, and people said some of the rudest, nastiest things about her. And I quoted some of them. I said, why would somebody say something so nasty? And somebody yelled from the audience, like, well, it's true. I'm like, it's not true, man. That's somebody's mother. That's somebody's wife. You can disagree with her on policy issues. I said, but what the hell are you doing? You think somebody vote Democrat their whole life, and because you say something nasty about the former first lady, you think all of a sudden they're going to vote Republican? What are you doing? And about 2/3 of them got it. They got it, and they were like reading me. And the last third was fighting me because they thought I was a liberal. And I said, listen to what I'm saying to you. I am a conservative. I vote conservative. I donate conservative. I am a Christian man, and I am meeting a woman who is the wife of the President of the United States, and she was delightful, and I'm delightful, and I got a photo with her, and I'm happy to share that. What is in your heart that you would say that, right? That's wrong. It's wrong, But and it happens on both sides. People are nasty on both sides, right? Yeah. But we have got to put an end to that. People are afraid, I think, of me being kind to a Democrat in office because they think like I'm endorsing them. Like what was it? Oh, I met Congressman Maxwell Frost, youngest member of Congress, delightful young man. We talked, and of course we don't agree on a lot of issues, but he was delightful. I took a picture with him, and I said, this is a progressive Democrat. I'm a conservative Christian, Republican, and put a picture out. And this guy started commenting. He started talking about the Grammys. What, I'm going to talk about the Grammys? What are you talking about, man? And I finally said, were you wanting me to punch him in the face? Like, what do you want me to do? I'm meeting with another human being. We're talking about topics that I'm prepared to talk about. I'm talking about real estate. I'm talking about Black colleges. I'm talking about topics I can't, what are you talking about, right? But we have to have a place of conversation and relationship so we can work together. He's not my enemy. He's my fellow American, right? Like, we're in this together, man. And by the way, I've always gotten better in life when people give me a difference of opinion. Yeah. It's not a threat. Sometimes people tell me things. I'm like, well, I'm wrong. That's better. Let's do that. Right? Anyway, it's a pleasure hanging out with you.
We need more people like you, John.
Oh, that's kind. We need more FAMU grads is what we need.
And then I didn't tell you, what a tie. That black and white looks good. I like that.
Hey, thank you. I put on a tie today because I was doing this. I want to make sure I look professional. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you, John. I really appreciate your time, and hopefully we can talk again.
All right, buddy. Take care. Let me know how I can help you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.